A former lowlife, but now people call me the king. Tearing it up with every lyric that I bring to the table. Because I'm willing and able, I'm in more homes than Comcast cable. I got the skill that'll rattle your brain. I'm a threat like Saddam Hussein, everybody know my name. Joe Habib's a top soldier, kid they should've told you, you really need to pack a lunch. My words hit hard just like a Tyson punch, so give me a chance, I bet you I can make you dance. Show me your girl, I bet you I get in her pants. I'm breaking egos and money is what I'm stacking. Joe Habib on the mic, you know I'm down for action. Shout out to Make Beats Sir and the Beat Smith and the whole Rope a Dope radio crew. Yeah. All right, good morning, everybody. What's going on? Big fight last night, but somewhat uneventful. Thought Canelo did a great job. Did a good job. You can argue great job based on the results of the scorecards. I mean, if you scored the fight objectively, was it impossible to score the fight 116 to 112? No, but most people I talked to had it like 7-3. 117, 111, 9-3. It was pretty wide victory for Canelo, but he did what he had to do. Was it a great performance? Nah, it was a good performance, decent performance, nothing to write home about. I thought Golovkin went on a little bit of a run in rounds 9, 10, and 11. And you could argue that first round could have gone either way, but you know, it is what it is. But one thing that kind of stood out to me was the post-fight press conference. And a lot of press were asking Canelo Alvarez about David Benavidez, right? That's the fight that the public seems to want, right? It's the fight that the public seems to want. I don't think there's anyone out there at super middleweight right now that anyone would like to see Canelo fight more than David Benavidez. So, of course, the questions are going to pop up after the Golovkin fight at the post-fight press conference. Of course, reporters are going to ask Canelo, what do you think about David Benavidez? And of course, they're going to challenge him about, I don't want to fight Mexicans. And, you know, technically, I think David Benavidez would be considered a Mexican-American. Anyone can debate this with me. Maybe I'm unqualified to even have an opinion on this, but, you know, tell me if I'm wrong. But, you know, I think David Benavidez would be considered like a Mexican-American more so than a Mexican nationalist. I don't know what Canelo really meant, but he was asked about that statement as well. And he said, well, you know, you guys are taking me out of context. I said I don't want to fight Mexicans, but I didn't say that I would not fight Mexicans. So I kind of get that. Maybe he would prefer not to fight another Mexican fighter, but did he close the door on fighting another Mexican fighter in the future? Probably not. But again, it's hard to kind of decipher that statement because it's kind of implying that you don't want to fight fighters of Mexican descent, right? So of course people are going to challenge you on that. They're going to ask you that because there's two future opponents out there that are, you know, Gilberto Ramirez is a Mexican nationalist and David Benavidez is you know, of Mexican descent. So those are two fights that would be very intriguing fights for Canelo in the future. So if you're going to get rid of those two fights, then I don't know, man. That's people are going to be like, why? Those are like who's better to fight? Like, so if Gilberto Ramirez does beat Dimitri Bivol, which I believe he's going to do, and that's debatable. I mean, obviously Bivol is going to be favored, whatever the case may be. But if Ramirez were to beat Bivol, then why not fight Gilberto Ramirez? Why not go back up there and have a big Mexican showdown with Gilberto Ramirez? And Canelo's like, well, who did David Benavidez beat? You know, you could sit there and say that about a lot of guys. Like I've always said this: nobody fights anybody until they fight somebody. So at some point, you know, You got to give a guy a shot. You can't. It's like a guy that goes in for a job interview. Oh, you don't have any experience. Well, if no one gives that guy a shot, then he's never going to get the experience. Oh, well, why didn't David Benavidez fight Caleb Plant? Why didn't he fight David Morrell? You know, why didn't he fight this guy? Why didn't he fight that guy? Okay, that's great, but I mean, we could try to make the fights. These fights could have tried to have been made, but maybe they just couldn't get made. Maybe Demetrius Andrade, from what I was told, they offered Demetrius Andrade to fight. He didn't want the fight. I asked Demetrius Andrade himself. He's like, "Why should I even fight David Benavidez? What does that do for me?" So if David Benavidez does want to fight these guys, and these guys don't want to fight him, if Caleb Plant doesn't want to fight him, if Demetrius Andrade doesn't want to fight him, if David Morrell doesn't want to fight him, I don't hear anyone calling out David Benavidez's name. Then you can argue, well, that's because it's too much risk for too little reward, whatever the case may be. But I don't hear anyone banging down the doors to fight David Benavidez. But of course, everyone wants to fight Canelo Alvarez, and we know why, because he's the cash cow. So why get angry because people are going to call you out? You have all the belts. All roads lead to you, right? All roads lead to you. You have all the belts. So you're going to get mad because people are going to call you out. You're going to get mad because people want you to fight David Benavidez. If you don't fight David Benavidez, then who else is there for you to fight at 168? What's a bigger fight out there at 168 than David Benavidez? Who are you going to fight? Who are you going to fight? You're taking it too literal. Obviously, he's open to fight anyone, be it a Mexican. You don't know that, brother. You're assuming. You're speculating. If people, if you're going to say something like that, if Canelo Alvarez is going to say something like that, then people are going to call him out on it. They're going to question it. And then you have all these fans running interference for Canelo. I mean, he said what he said. But the big thing is, like, why does he get so triggered? He got like, oh, you guys don't respect me. Why? Why don't we respect you? Because we want you to fight David Benavidez? Listen, it's like anything else. If you work at a job, if you are a businessman and, every year for 10 years, you turned over a profit at your company, right? Or you had a high level of performance for 10 years, right? Do you think your boss or the board of directors of the company are going to say, okay, well, you've done a great job for 10 years. Now you don't have to do a great job anymore. The expectations are going to change now because you did so well for us in the past. Then we're just going to stop wanting the best out of you from here on out. You can just stop doing the best because you've done so well for such a long period of time. Now the expectations are that you can rest on your laurels. Here's the thing, guys. I hear this defense of Canelo Alvarez. Why aren't you going at these other guys? Why are you criticizing Canelo Alvarez? No, again, if you're going to be thought of and mentioned of and considered the best fighter in the world, right? And you're going to be you're being put in there as and mentioned as the best Mexican fighter of all time, or one of the best fighters of all time. If those lofty statements are going to be made about you, then obviously the expectations are going to be high, right? So because he's held to a higher standard, because of the position he is in, because he's the face of boxing, of course he's going to be critiqued and looked at under the microscope more so than other fighters. So yes, of course the expectations are going to be higher for him. It's understandable. I don't understand why people can't figure that out. Just like the CEO of the company is going to be held to a higher standard and more responsibility is going to be expected of him, more so than a guy who's just a day-to-day employee, who's not a manager, who's not a CEO. So the higher you are up on the food chain, the more responsibility, the greater the expectations are going to be thrust upon you, right? They're going to be asked of you. So if you're going to be the best pound for pound fighter in the sport, then you can't sit there and say, well, look what I've done. Look what I've done. No, because people are going to continue to expect you to do more and more and more. Doesn't mean we're not going to give you credit when you do something good, but we're not going to, like, people aren't going to say, okay, because you fought A, B, C, and D, now you can go out and fight lower level guys, right? If you're going to want to be at the top, in order to stay at the top, you're going to have to keep fighting tough guys, right? Now, can you have a stay busy fight every now and then? I guess, yeah, it's, of course, that's fine. But at some point, people are going to want you to fight David Benavidez. And for all you David Benavidez critics out there, what is David Benavidez do? What has David Benavidez done? Why does he deserve a shot? Let me just ask you all a question. Let's take a look at the rankings. Now, the ring rankings have David Benavidez at number 1, right? So you got Caleb Plant at number 2. You got Andre Durrell at number 3. You got John Ryder at number 4. You got Christian Mabili at number 5. Zach Parker at number 6. And you got David Morrell at number 7. Now, I challenge anyone out there, name 5 fighters currently at super middleweight, or even 3 fighters currently at super middleweight that you would say are better than David Benavidez. And let's take Canelo Alvarez out of the equation because he's the ring champion. He's the undisputed champion. Name 5 or no. Name 3 fighters better than David Benavidez in this top 10. Now, would you pick Caleb Plant to beat David Benavidez? I wouldn't. Anthony Durrell, excuse me. I think I said Andre Durrell before. I meant to say Anthony Durrell. I apologize for that. Anthony Durrell was already beaten by David Benavidez, okay? So scratch him off the list. Do you guys think John Ryder would beat David Benavidez? Do you think Zach Parker would beat David Benavidez? Do you think David Morrell would beat David Benavidez? You can make an argument that Zach Parker or David Morrell could. I don't think most people would be picking Zach Parker or David Morrell or even John Ryder over David Benavidez, right? Now, out of this top 10, right? Let's go down further. We got Eric Bazayan, and we got Lerone Richards, and we got Vladimir Shishkin. These are fighters that not a ton of people know, right? So out of this top 10, who really has a great resume? Who has a better resume than David Benavidez? And you can argue John Ryder probably has better names because he fought Caleb Smith. He fought Danny Jacobs. Those are 2 decent names. He fought Danny Jacobs probably after, not at his best, maybe. We can argue Gabe Rosado beat Danny Jacobs, and you can even argue Danny Jacobs did beat John Ryder. I had Danny Jacobs winning that fight 7-5. I thought he edged it out, but it is what it is. John Ryder got the decision. So you can argue maybe John Ryder arguably has a better resume than David Benavidez because he fought 2 champions. David Benavidez really only fought 1 champion in Anthony Durrell, basically, right? So John Ryder, you can argue, has a better resume, but again, he lost to Caleb Smith. I thought actually John Ryder beat Caleb Smith, and he beat Danny Jacobs, which was a kind of somewhat past his prime, faded Danny Jacobs, right? So at this point in time, do you think Danny Jacobs could beat David Benavidez, or would you even pick Caleb Smith to beat David Benavidez? You can argue maybe Caleb Smith could beat David Benavidez, but again, I think most people would still pick David Benavidez over those 2 opponents. Clearly over Danny Jacobs. You can make an argument that maybe Caleb Smith would could beat David Benavidez, but I would still pick David Benavidez over Caleb Smith. So out of this top 10 here at super middleweight, I mean, you can argue John Ryder probably has a better resume than David Benavidez. I think you can make an argument there, but not by much. Not by much. Slightly, right? I mean, you fought Caleb Smith, and technically in the record books you lost. And you got to win over Danny Jacobs, but most people thought you lost that fight. But it is what it is. I mean, you still fought those two guys. You got to win over Danny Jacobs, and you got a hotly disputed loss against Caleb Smith. I thought you beat Caleb Smith, right? So you can argue maybe John Ryder has a better resume than David Benavidez, but would anyone pick John Ryder to beat David Benavidez if they were to fight tomorrow? I don't think many people would. So out of this top 10, I think you can argue that most people would say David Benavidez is the best fighter out of this top 10. You know, you could argue, you can make an argument that Zach Parker or David Morrell would give David Benavidez a tough fight, right? Caleb Plant would give him a tough fight. And some people would argue Caleb Plant would beat him. But if you were to take a poll, I think most people would say if David Benavidez was to fight Caleb Plant tomorrow, the odds makers would have Benavidez a favorite. If he was to fight John Ryder tomorrow, the odds makers would have David Benavidez a favorite. If he was to fight Christian Mabili, Zach Parker, David Morrell, all these guys, David Benavidez would be the favorite to beat all these guys. So if David Benavidez has done nothing, then what have these other guys done? You know, Caleb Plant fought you. You already beat him. So why did you fight? Obviously, you fight Caleb Plant because he was the IBF champion. I understand you wanted to be undisputed. But regardless, is Caleb Plant's resume, you know, better than David Benavidez's? I don't think that there's much of a difference there. So none of these guys, with the exception of John Ryder, really have great resumes. I think that you can argue John Ryder has a very solid resume at super middleweight, but once again, he's got 5 losses, 17 KOs in 36 fights. I don't think he's as big as a threat, and I think most people would agree he's not as big as a threat as a guy like David Benavidez, who has 26 victories with 23 knockouts. Okay. And yes, John Ryder's resume is better, in my opinion, than David Benavidez. Obviously, Caleb Plant, because he has that fight with Canelo, you could argue that his resume currently could be better than David Benavidez. But once again, you know, he fought Canelo Alvarez. He lost. He got knocked out. I give Caleb Plant full credit. I thought he won 5 of those 10 rounds. I thought the fight was even up until the point of the stoppage. So I give Caleb Plant full credit for putting on great performance against Canelo Alvarez. But I still believe and then again, it's my opinion that David Benavidez would give Canelo Alvarez a much, much tougher fight. That's just my opinion. And all these things that I'm saying right now, again, are debatable, but I think I have a strong argument. And I think there's a large group of people that would probably agree with me. So I guess my argument is, okay, you can argue David Benavidez hasn't done much, but neither is anyone else in the top 10. So if you're going to continue to campaign at super middleweight, then you can use that argument that you're using against David Benavidez with pretty much all these other guys as well. And you can say, well, maybe John Ryder has a better resume. But again, would you really classify John Ryder as being a more dangerous fighter, a bigger threat than David Benavidez? Once again, I repeat, would anyone pick John Ryder to beat David Benavidez if they were to fight tomorrow? You know, and currently, David Benavidez is the WBC interim super middleweight champion, so he is not ranked by any of the other sanctioning bodies. And you know, in the most recent future, all right, he's probably going to be listed as the mandatory for Canelo Alvarez eventually, very shortly, in the near distant future. So at some point, the WBC could order that fight, or maybe they could not. Seeing how Canelo Alvarez is so upset every time David Benavidez's name gets mentioned, you know, they tell he's being, you know, he tells people, "Oh, why are you disrespecting me?" Just because, you know, they're asking you to about a David Benavidez fight. If that's considered disrespect, I don't understand that. I don't really get that. So, yeah, I disagree. Again, this is your opinion. I don't think John Ryder would beat David Benavidez. We'll do a poll, right? Let's take a look at the current poll we have there. Let's take a look at the current poll. We'll take a look at the current poll we have in there, and So we have, is David Benavidez Canelo's toughest test at super middleweight? 71% say yes, 29% say no. So most people agree that, this would be the toughest fight for Canelo Alvarez at super middleweight. So let's end this poll and let's start another poll, right? Who would win? David Benavidez or John Ryder? Okay. And we'll see what the poll says, what the chat says here. So yeah, that's the thing, man. Like, name five, not even name five. Name three fighters right now at super middleweight that you would say is better, are better than David Benavidez. Who do you think right now at super middleweight is better than David Benavidez? Besides Canelo Alvarez, if you want to, you know, put him at the top. Who's better? Who's better? That's what I want to know. Who would you classify as a better fighter? Let's go down the list once again. And BoxRec is crazy. So, because BoxRec has Gennady Golovkin and Demetrius Andre. Gennady Golovkin fought one fight at super middleweight and lost. And Demetrius Andre has never fought at super middleweight. They got Danny Jacobs ahead, and he's lost at super middleweight. He lost his last fight against John Ryder. So they got Boxer has David Benavidez at number 6, and they got Demetrius Andre, John Ryder, Daniel Jacobs ahead of David Benavidez. Now, you can make an argument that if you want to put John Ryder ahead of David Benavidez, I mean, you can make an argument about that. I wouldn't, but my opinion, outside of Canelo Alvarez, David Benavidez is at least number 2 on the majority of people's top 10. He would be number 2 at super middleweight in most people's opinion. I would suspect. I could be wrong, but again, if I was to ask 100 people, I would argue that at least 80 of those people would say David Benavidez. Well, the poll said 71. So again, 71 is a substantial amount. It's just a substantial percentage. So the poll said like 71%. So I mean that could be an accurate representation of what people's opinions are out there. Yeah, I don't think John Ryder would beat David Benavidez. I just don't. So that's the thing. Like, why was Canelo Alvarez? He basically said, "Oh, no more questions. I'm tired. Uh, I don't want to talk anymore." As soon as David Benavidez's name got mentioned, it reminds me of like when people kept asking Floyd back in the day, like, "When are you going to fight Pacquiao? When are you going to fight Pacquiao?" And he would always get mad every time that question was asked. And like, why? Why would you get angry because people want you to fight David Benavidez? Who else is out there at 168 for you to fight? I'm telling you right now, I have a feeling he's going to fight John Ryder in the UK next. That's just my opinion. That's what I think the next fight is. Right? I think he's going to push this David Benavidez fight off as long as he can. I'm not saying he'll never fight David Benavidez, but I don't think there is a sense of urgency for Canelo Alvarez to fight David Benavidez. But if you would ask me and most people out there, I think most people would prefer a David Benavidez fight for Canelo, right? So let's look at the poll right now. So 71%, once again, say David Benavidez would beat John Ryder, right? So that's pretty overwhelming, right? That's overwhelming. So like I said, if we look at the top 10, let's look at all of the number 1 rated fighters here at super middleweight for Canelo Alvarez. Let's look at the WBC's number one contender and the WBA's number one contender. So we got Pavel Silyagan. Paul, I apologize if I can't pronounce this guy's name. We got Adios, your Bostonelli. He's number one by the WBA. David Morrell is the WBA's regular champion. And we got the IBF's got William Skull as their number one. And the WBO has Zach Parker as their number one. Right? And I guess Zach Parker and Demetrius Andrade are going to be fighting for a mandatory spot for the WBO's number one, right? So John Ryder is ranked number 2 by the WBA and ranked number 3 by the WBO, right? So, Caleb Plant's ranked number 2 by the WBC. He's ranked number 3 by the WBA, ranked number 3 by the IBF. And he's ranked number 7 by the WBO. So he's still floating around in there. But again, so you got Pavel Silgegin, Caleb Plant, Christian Mabili, Anthony Durrell, John Ryder, Danny Jacobs, Jesse Hart, Vladimir Shishkin, Eric Banzayan, Lerone Richards. That's the WBC's top 10. He already beat Caleb Plant. Anthony Durrell already lost to Saul Alvarez. He already lost to David Benavidez. I'm sorry. He already lost to David Benavidez. Danny Jacobs was already beat by Canelo Alvarez, and Caleb Plant was already beat by Canelo Alvarez. So who in that WBC's top 10 could Canelo fight? Again, probably John Ryder. Probably the John Ryder fight in the UK. That's what they're going to do next. Now, if you guys think that the John Ryder fight is better than a David Benavidez fight, then that's your opinion. I don't have a problem with that. If that's what you think, that's what you think. But I just put in the chat, who would win, David Benavidez or John Ryder? Most people, let's take a look at the current poll right now. Yeah, 71% think David Benavidez is better than John Ryder. So most people want to see a David Benavidez fight over a John Ryder fight. John Ryder is number 2 once again, like Caleb Plant, Anthony Durrell, Rocky Fielding. Canelo already beat Rocky Fielding. You already beat Caleb Plant. Anthony Durrell, I don't know. I don't think that's a great fight. So who else? If he doesn't fight David Benavidez at 168 next, who else would you want to see him fight? It seems like he's probably going to fight John Ryder. Now, if you think that John Ryder is a better fighter than David Benavidez, and you like that fight more so than a David Benavidez fight, then okay, that's fine. I think styles make fights, and I think David Benavidez's style, in my opinion, would present a much tougher challenge to Canelo Alvarez than John Ryder would, right? That's just my opinion. Again, it's subjective, right? But I do think he's going to fight John Ryder next. That's what I said. I said that immediately after he lost to Bivol. I said after the Golovkin fight you watch, he's going to end up fighting John Ryder in the UK. And that's what I think is going to happen. I don't think you're going to see a David Benavidez fight next. I think you're going to see a John Ryder fight. John Ryder, I think, does and has worked with Eddie Hearn in the past. They did the Jacobs fight on DAZN. They did the Caleb Smith fight, I believe, was on DAZN, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that would be an easy fight for Eddie Hearn to make. So there's one fight left, and we have to see what's going to happen in the Gilberto Ramirez Dimitri Bivol fight. Even if Bivol does win, I still question, right? I still question whether or not Canelo Alvarez takes that rematch. I still question it. I still think that you can argue that he may not even take that rematch, if I'm being honest. If I'm being honest, you can argue that he may not take that rematch. He may not take that rematch. So in my opinion, I think the next fight's going to be John Ryder. Now, Again, don't you guys find it weird that as soon as David Benavidez's name was mentioned, Canelo Alvarez got so angry, right? He got so angry, and and after that his name was mentioned, he wanted to end the press conference. Why? Why did Canelo Alvarez get so offended when David Benavidez's name was mentioned? Oh, well, I've done this, I've done that. Again, that's fine. No one's taking any of your accomplishments away from you. But again, guys, you Canelo Alvarez defenders, right? We can't say anything about like, anytime we mention a fight for Canelo Alvarez, right? Here's the immediate response. Oh, why does he have to fight that guy? What has that guy done? Okay, I just showed you the top 10. What have these other guys done? Right? What have these other guys done? John Ryder technically has a loss against Caleb Smith. And he just beat Danny Jacobs, who arguably lost to Gabe Rosado. Right? Danny Jacobs has lost virtually every big fight he's been in. And I say that with all due respect. I thought Danny Jacobs beat Golovkin, but he got up, but technically, officially that's a loss. He lost to Canelo, right? He just lost to John Ryder. Had a very, very uninspired, disputed, debatable win over Gabriel Rosado. And we just saw Gabe Rosado, how he looked last night. So what has John Ryder done? Okay, he beat Danny Jacobs. Right? Is Danny Jacobs right now? Would Danny Jacobs beat Anthony Durrell? I don't know, man. At 168, that's a pick 'em fight to me. I may pick Anthony Durrell over Danny Jacobs right now. So you could use that same argument. Like, what has Caleb Plant done? Right? He fought Canelo Alvarez. He got knocked out. Anthony Durrell got stopped by David Benavidez. John Ryder lost to Caleb Smith. Arguably, I thought he won, but officially he lost. And he beat a faded, not the best version of Danny Jacobs, who you can argue lost the majority of his big fights. With all due respect, I love Danny Jacobs. I think he's a very good fighter. But again, the record books don't lie. He's lost most of his big fights. Christian Babili from France, I don't know much about him. Zach Parker, I think is a very good fighter. But again, he still has to prove himself with his resume. David Morrell, 7-0, WBA regular champion. What has he done? I think the eye test proves to me he's a very good fighter. I think that would be a tough fight for David Benavidez. But once again, I would pick David Benavidez. So what have these other guys done? So if you're going to use that same argument against David Benavidez, then you're going to have to use it against the rest of these guys. Right? Because technically the biggest win John Ryder has, right? The biggest win John Ryder has in his last 6 fights, right? Let's look at John Ryder's last 6 fights. Take a look at John Ryder's last 6 fights. Daniel Jacobs, again, that's a decent name. We'll give him that. Joseph Jerko, win TKO 5, right? Joseph Jerko is 8-3, and he fought him in 2021, right? So he fought one fight in 2021. 2020, he beat a guy named Mike Guy, who was 12-5, right? So he fought once in 2020, once in 2021. 2019, he lost to Caleb Smith, right? Unanimous decision, right? So that's one name, right? Now 2019, Bilai Akawai. Who's that guy? With all due respect, 20-1. I don't know him. So technically, in his last 6 fights, right? John Ryder fought two names, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Andre Sirotkin, that's in 2018, right? That's in 2018. TKO 7. Bilia Akawai, 2019, TKO 3. Then he lost to Caleb Smith, beat Mike Guy, beat Joseph Jerko, and then he beat Danny Jacobs in a hotly disputed split decision victory. But again, we're going to give him that. That's a win. It's a decent win. We'll give him that. But he lost to Caleb Smith. So he has one big win in, and again, you could argue that win. It was, Daniel Jacobs coming off, lost to Canelo, lost to Golovkin. Like I said, lost all his big fights, but we'll give him that. We're going to give him that, right? But is that win really that much more impressive, that Danny Jacobs win, right? Is that win better, more impressive, more significant than Benavidez' win over an Anthony Durrell? So Anthony Durrell is a former champion, right? Anthony Durrell is a former champion. David Lemieux, can you argue David Lemieux is a better fighter than Daniel Jacobs? Would David Lemieux beat Daniel Jacobs right now? You can make an argument he would. So let's look at David Benavidez' last 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we got Jay Leon Love, right? Knockout 2 rounds. Anthony Durrell, knockout 9 rounds. Roman Alexis Angulo, he stopped him in 10. Right? The only time Angulo's a tough guy, decent opponent. Saw what he just did, in the Berlanga fight. He's a tough guy, right? He's a decent puncher. He was 26-0 at the time, and Benavidez was the first guy to stop him, right? Ronald Ellis, decent guy, he's okay. David Benavidez stopped him, right? Tyrone Davis, knockout 7. David Lemieux, faded. But once again, is he that much? Is that win over David Lemieux, in your opinion, that much less significant or more or less impressive than John Ryder's victory over Daniel Jacobs? David Lemieux is a former champion. Anthony Durrell's a former champion, right? So that's 2 former champions that he's beaten, right? So is David Benavidez' resume that much, or is it that much worse than John Ryder's, or is it comparable? Is beating Daniel Jacobs by split decision more impressive than knocking David Lemieux out in 3 rounds? That's the question you have to ask. So you can make an argument. You can make an argument John Ryder's resume is better than David Benavidez. You can make that argument. He's got more fights. Caleb Smith was at the time was the best super middleweight in the world, and he lost a split decision to him. I thought he beat him. So you can make that argument, but once again, that goes down as a loss, right? So if we're going to go off of impressive victories in the last 6, then we have to ask: is beating Daniel Jacobs by split decision more impressive than knocking out David Lemieux in 3 rounds? That's what you have to ask yourself. Team Batman Boston says Ryder arguably beat Saunders and Smith. Arguably, but in the record books, it went down as a loss. So we have to go off of what is, not what should have been or what could have been, right? So technically, if you want to use Canelo's logic, what has this guy done? What has that guy done? If you're going to use that logic, then basically no one deserves a shot at Canelo Alvarez at 168, right? No one really deserves a shot at Canelo Alvarez at 168 if we're going to use that logic, right? Because no one in that top 10, as I explained, really has done anything in their last 6 fights that set the world on fire, right? The only guy that has an argument is John Ryder. And if you were to ask me who's fought tougher fights throughout the course of their career, I would definitely say John Ryder. In terms of guys fought, who has a better resume, David Benavidez or John Ryder? Hands down, I would give it to John Ryder. I concede that point. But once again, John Ryder lost to the guys he stepped up against. Every big fight John Ryder's been in, he's lost. Every big fight Daniel Jacobs has been in, he's lost. Right? So they have better names than David Benavidez. Right? David Benavidez's resume is okay. It's not the greatest. It's okay. Would it be more impressive if David Benavidez did fight John Ryder? If he did fight Demetrius Andrade? If he did fight Caleb Plant? If he did fight Caleb Smith? Absolutely. Absolutely. So Canelo clearly does have the best resume at 168, right? But are we going to just say because he's fought everybody now, so now he doesn't have to fight top guys anymore? We're going to just say because of what he's done in the past, we shouldn't have to expect him to continue to do what he's done in the past into the future. The old analogy I use, okay, you've worked for us for 10 years, Mr. Habib. You've been an exemplary employee. But these last 2 years, you've decided that you weren't going to work as hard, or you weren't going to give us that same high level of productivity and efficiency. You did not turn the same profit you turned over for our company those previous 10 years. Are we going to turn around and say, well, Mr. Habib, great job. We're going to give you a pass because what you've done for the last 10 years? Or are the expectations of Mr. Habib going to still be the same, or if not greater than when he's done in those past 10 years? So you can't rest on your laurels. You can't go by what you did in the past. The old saying is, what have you done for me lately? And I'm not saying what Canelo has done lately has been bad. But why should we lessen the expectations moving forward? Why should we not want him to continue to fight the best? Well, he's already done that. Okay. Name 3 fighters currently at super middleweight who are better than David Benavidez. Name 3 fighters right now at super middleweight. If someone put a gun to your head, you would pick to beat him, besides Canelo Alvarez. If you think Canelo Alvarez would beat David Benavidez, that's fine. If I was to ask you, right? If I was to ask you if David Benavidez were to fight Caleb Plant, who would you pick? If I was to ask you, well, because David Benavidez already beat Anthony Durrell. Anthony Durrell is currently number 3 at super middleweight, right? So technically, you can make an argument that David Benavidez beat a guy in the top 4 in Anthony Durrell, right? If David Benavidez were to fight John Ryder tomorrow, would you pick John Ryder to win? Right? If he was to fight Zach Parker, would you pick Zach Parker? Would you pick David Morrell? I mean, again, you could make an argument that those guys could beat him, but do you think they would? Who would you favor? Who would be the favorite in those fights? So, in my opinion, and I think most people's opinion, 75% of the people in this chat, in this poll, 76 right now, believe David Benavidez would beat John Ryder. That's pretty overwhelmingly in David Benavidez's favor. So I think if we were to make an argument, the toughest, and we already had that poll, the toughest fight for Canelo Alvarez at 168, everyone's saying David Benavidez, right? So if that fight doesn't happen, people have a right to ask why. People have a right to want to see that fight. People have a right to ask Canelo, when are you going to fight this guy? And fans and journalists should not be ridiculed just for simply saying, we would like to see you fight David Benavidez. But again, everyone running interference for Canelo. Well, what has David Benavidez done? My response is, what have the other guys done? What have the other guys done? And would you pick those other guys to beat David Benavidez? And I'm not saying I'm not disappointed that David Benavidez hasn't fought Caleb Plant. I'm not saying I'm not disappointed that David Benavidez has not fought John Ryder. I'm not saying that I'm not disappointed that David Benavidez has not fought Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, Demetrius Andrade. I'm not saying that those fights shouldn't have happened. But I don't know why they didn't happen. Am I gonna just assume that David Benavidez did not want those fights, that he would not have taken those fights? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. There's two sides to every story. David Benavidez can say, these guys didn't want to fight me. These guys can say David Benavidez didn't want to fight them. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know whose fault it was. I'm not saying those fights shouldn't have happened. I'm not saying I didn't want to see those fights happen. But at the end of the day, they didn't happen, right? So if none of those guys have fought each other, right? So every time Canelo looks for an opponent, right? Is there going to be a tournament to so now basically the expectation is there has to be a tournament now every time you want to fight Canelo Alvarez. You have to have a round robin series. So you essentially there has to be a Super 6 and someone has to earn that, win a Super 6 tournament, right? They have to win a Super 6 tournament to earn the right to fight Canelo Alvarez. Is that going to be the new standard? Is that going to be the new standard? Because if that's the case, then none of these guys are going to be able to fight Canelo for fucking 3 years. And who's Canelo going to fight? If all these guys got to fight a round robin Super 6 tournament, right? If that's the expectation, then who the fuck is Canelo Alvarez going to fight? If Canelo Alvarez is not going to fight David Benavidez, then who the fuck is he supposed to fight? And again, I mean, if he fights John Ryder next, he fights John Ryder next. I just think he stops John Ryder. Stylistically, I just don't think John Ryder matches up well against Canelo Alvarez at all. I love the Benavidez fight for him. I love Benavidez, but he doesn't bring anything to the table. Okay, then who brings something to the table? Does John Ryder bring something to the table? Does David Morrell bring something to the table? Does Anthony Jarrell bring something to the table? Who at 168 brings something to the table? If Andre beats Parker and positions himself to be the WBO mandatory, will Andre get a shot at Canelo? Or will Canelo just dismiss him as, you fought nobody, you're a horrible fighter? That's the default. That's the default every time someone gets mentioned to fight Canelo Alvarez. What has that guy done? So once again, you got to walk through fire. You got to win a Super 6 tournament, right? You got to jump through all these hoops to get a shot at Canelo Alvarez. That's what it's got to. Did Rocky Fielding have to do that? Did Yildirim have to do that? Did Sergey Kovalev have to do that? Did Gennady Golovkin have to do that? Did those guys have to walk through fire, jump through hoops, win Super 6 tournaments to get a shot at Canelo Alvarez? Would anyone pick Gennady Golovkin right now to beat David Benavidez? Right? That's the thing. And again, on the books, John Ryder lost. He lost to Caleb Smith, and he eked out a split decision over a badly faded Daniel Jacobs, who hasn't looked good in a long time, with all due respect. And I love Danny Jacobs. Right? So that's the thing. Basically, the new standard is if you want to fight Canelo Alvarez, you got to win a Super 6 tournament. So JC says you got to earn it. Okay, you got to earn it. So if all these fighters have to fight each other, then that means Canelo Alvarez can't fight any of them for the next 3 years. So if you tie all those guys up, in a Super 6 tournament, then how are they going to fight Canelo Alvarez? Who is Canelo Alvarez going to fight if Caleb Plant? Let's do this now. Let's put it together. All right. So we got Caleb Plant fighting David Benavidez, right? We'll have John Ryder fight Anthony Durrell. We'll have Zach Parker fight Demetrius Andrade. And we'll have David Morrell fight Christian Mabuli, right? So if all these fights have to take place, right, then who is Canelo Alvarez going to fight in the interim? See what I'm saying? Canelo's got to fight somebody, right? Why don't you ask if Benavidez beats Bivol? I would if Benavidez went up to 175. I would ask that. Why would I not ask that? So basically what you're saying is you want all these guys have to fight in a Super 6 tournament in order to fight Canelo. And if that's the case, then Canelo is not going to have a fight for the next 3 years. Who's he going to fight? Who's he going to fight? And okay, Floyd pulled the same crap, Joe. Stop it, man. Again, so now we're gonna do the whataboutisms. Did you like it when Floyd did it? So if you didn't like it when Floyd did it, then why are you gonna like it when Canelo did it? That's the argument. So if there has to be a Super 6 tournament, once again, let's look at the top 10. Let's look at the top 10. Caleb Plant. What has he done? He beat Ustakagi, right? David Benavidez, you can argue. What has he got? You got David Lemieux, a former champion, and he's got Anthony Durrell, former champion, right? John Ryder lost to Caleb Smith and won a disputed split decision over Daniel Jacobs, right? Christian Mabili, I don't know what he done. Zach Parker, again, what's he done? Not much. David Morrell. So none of these guys have done anything, really. I'm not going to say they haven't done anything, but they haven't done anything. None of these guys have a standout, stellar, impressive resume at super middleweight. None of them. So you can argue nobody in the top 10 deserves to fight Canelo Alvarez based off of the logic of what have you done. So if that's the case, then Canelo doesn't have to, if you're going to use that logic, then Canelo's not going to fight any of those guys then. So if everyone has to fight a Super 6 for the right to fight Canelo Alvarez, then Canelo Alvarez is going to have no opponents for the next 3 years. Thank you, Ben Mateus. Says Margarito, Paul Williams, Sergio all triggered him. I agree. I mean, for Floyd to not fight to not fight Sergio Martinez, I think it was a bad move. That's considering, I said that. I even told his father that. We could do this to any fighter, but here's the problem. The guy at the top is always going to get criticized more so than the guys underneath him because the expectations and the standards are going to be higher for him. If you are the face of boxing, you are the self-proclaimed and you have been mentioned and considered to be the best fighter in boxing today, then you can't expect the standards that are set for you to be the same as the standards set for the fighters below you. So you could say all those, what have these other guys done? And you can make that argument. I'm not here to defend that. But what I am saying is the standards for Canelo are going to be higher, right? They're going to be higher because he is supposedly the self-proclaimed best fighter in the sport. So you can't sit there and say, oh, he's done this, he's done that, he's done this, and then say he doesn't have to do it anymore. If you've done great things in the past, right, then you can't expect people to not continue to expect great things from you from the future, right? So every time we ask about a specific fight for Canelo Alvarez, this is what we get told. What has this guy done? So if we're going to use that logic, then Canelo can't fight anybody then. What has anyone done in the top 10? I just went down the resumes, right? I showed you John Ryder's last 6, and I showed you David Benavidez's last 6. Was John Ryder's last 6 that much more impressive than David Benavidez's? One real big threat there, and that was Caleb Smith, right? And Caleb Smith beat him. I don't think on my scorecard, I thought John Ryder deserved the decision. But again, we can't go on the what ifs, the what abouts, the what shouldas. We have to go about what the what is. So if you look at the top 10, none of these guys really have a great resume. They don't. In the last 6 fights, right? In the last 6 fights, David Benavidez fought 2 world champions, right? He's fought 2 world champions. And John Ryder has fought 2 world champions in his last 6 fights. Now, once again, is John Ryder's split decision victory over Danny Jacobs more impressive than David Benavidez's 3rd round knockout over David Lemieux? Right? That's what you have to ask. That's what you have to ask. We got J. Leon Love, Anthony Durrell, Roman Alexis Angulo, Ronald Ellis, Kyron Davis, and David Lemieux. Right? Well, let's look at John Ryder's, because John Ryder is probably going to be the next guy. Right? So let's look at John Ryder's last 6. Take a look at John Ryder's last 6. And I did this earlier, but I'm just going to do it again for the people coming on now. Let's look at John Ryder's last 6. Got Daniel Jacobs, Joseph Jerko, Mike Guy, Caleb Smith, Balu. I apologize if I can't pronounce these guys' names because I'm trying. Bilai Akowai, right? And Andrea Zerokin. So there's 2 names in there, Daniel Jacobs and Caleb Smith. He lost the Caleb Smith fight, and he won an unimpressive split decision victory over Daniel Jacobs. And again, in the record books, that's a win. He gets credit for that. Daniel Jacobs is a solid fighter. You can argue not at this stage of his career, not the best, faded somewhat. But again, we'll give him that. So the last 6, you can argue it's a wash. I mean, the totality of John Ryder's resume is better, in my opinion, than David Benavidez. The totality. He's got more names on his resume than David Benavidez does. But again, he's older. His career has been longer. That's fine. You know, he's beat more names than he fought Billy Joe Saunders. He fought Rocky Fielding, decent guy. He fought Nick Blackwell. He fought some decent guys. But in his last 6, I don't think his last 6 is really better than David Benavidez's last 6. I think you can argue it's a wash. Right? The wash. I mean, Caleb Smith, he did fight Caleb Smith, who was the best super middleweight in the world, but he lost. He lost. So if we're gonna use that logic, then Canelo Alvarez can't fight anybody then. And then we're gonna have to have a Super 6. These guys are all gonna have to fight each other in a Super 6 tournament, and Canelo Alvarez is gonna have nobody to fight for the next 3 years. Joe, no one is saying Super 6, but a Plant Benavidez or a Chala Andrade would be nice. That's one fight, but no, they're just praying for the Canelo. Again, they did the same thing with Floyd. Everyone does that, right? But I don't know if David Benavidez does not want the Plant fight. He says he does. So I don't know. So again, if we're going to use this logic that nobody's done anything, then Canelo can't fight anybody then. Might as well just move up to light heavyweight. That's the thing. I'm going to end it on this. The argument is, why don't we give Canelo the respect he deserves? Gets credit for what he's done. But I'm going to use the same analogy. You're the CEO of the company. For the last 10 years, you had extraordinary results and performance, right? You've turned over a significant profit for the company. Company's grateful for what you've done over the last 10 years. But the next 2 years, you do a less than stellar job. You do a substandard job. You do a very unimpressive job. There's a significant drop or even a slight drop, whatever the case may be. You're just not doing what you did the previous 10 years. You can't go to the board of directors and say, well, look what I've done for the last 10 years. Are you going to erase all that because of what's going on in these last 2 years? And again, yeah, it's all about what you're doing now. So you're not going to, the expectations aren't going to be less or lowered for you because of what you've done. So if you were great in the past, people are going to continue to expect you to be great in the future. So you can't rest on your laurels. You can't say, well, look what I've done. Well, I'm doing more than everyone else. Well, again, here's the thing. Yeah, you're expected to do more than everyone else because you're supposedly better than everyone else. So why would we lower the bar for you? If anything, we're going to raise the bar for you because you're the best fighter in boxing, so you say. So your expectations are going to be higher than everyone else's. CEO earned. We're not saying that. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is the CEO is going to be expected to perform at a higher level than all of the other employees underneath him. And just because he's done well in the past does not give him a right, or he's not going to be given a pass if there is a decline in his performance moving forward. That's the argument. So if you're the CEO, the expectations of you are going to be much higher than the other employees. And because you've done great for the past 10 years, that doesn't mean you don't have to do great for the next 10. Right? The expectations aren't going to be lowered for you. Whereas the board of directors are going to want you to have a consistent high level of performance moving forward until you step down from the position of CEO. As long as you have that position of CEO, the expectations are that you're going to have to perform at a high level. We're not going to say you did great for the previous 10 years. Now you don't have to do it great anymore. Right? We're not going to give you a pass. That's the argument. Right? Even myself in certain jobs, right? I'd be with the company for 5 years, right? Circumstances presented themselves where I couldn't turn over the same profit, whether it be a recession, whether there be an extenuating circumstance. Why is the performance in your department gone down, Mr. Habib? Last year your profit margin was this. Now it's significantly lower. Your level of satisfaction has gone down. If I go to that person and say, well, yeah, you know what? Had a high turnover this year. 10 of my employees, they quit, had a lot of sick calls. The cost of food went up. If I use all these excuses, guess what? My boss doesn't care, because at the end of the day, it's about numbers. It's about what have you done for me lately? I can't turn around and say, look what I've done the last 5 years, and now you're gonna be mad at me for what I'm doing this year. What about what I've done those last 5 years? No. I still have to perform every year. So people are gonna continue to want Canelo Alvarez to fight the best forever. Right? He's not going to be able, he can say what he wants, but the expectations are not going to be lowered by the fans or by the press or by the media. There's always going to be that one guy out there that everyone's going to want you to fight. Now you can turn around and say, I can't fight everyone. That's fine. But that doesn't mean you're not going to be asked to fight everyone. That doesn't mean the expectations are that you're not supposed to fight everybody, right? What you've done is what you've done. It will never be erased. But moving forward, people are going to continue to want the best out of you. And for them to be ridiculed, I mean, he acted like a spoiled little brat yesterday when someone asked him. A lot of people were asking him about Benavidez, and he said, "That's it. I'm not answering any more questions." And he walked out of the press conference. I'm tired. I mean, come on, guys. That's a bad look. Oh, well, maybe he was. Again, that's fine, but it's still a bad look. Still a bad look. Right? He got triggered, man. He was pissed off. Anytime, if you want to get mad every time someone mentions David Benavidez, then like you can get mad, but that's a bad look, bro. What is it? What is it about David Benavidez's name that pisses you off so much, bro? I don't get it. I don't get it. Go into work tomorrow, right? And start doing like say to your boss, you know what? I've been a great employee for the last 5 years. I've decided because I've done so many great things for you and for this company, guess what? Guess what? I'm going to stop being mediocre. I'm going to stop being mediocre. I'm just going to start doing an okay job. How do you feel about that? Look what I've done in the past. I was phenomenal in the past, but moving forward, I'm just going to be okay. I'm just going to be average. Is that acceptable? Is that are you happy with that? Are you happy with that? Are you happy with that, sir? What is your boss going to say? Yeah, great. Be mediocre. Don't be great anymore. We don't want you to continue to do what you're doing in the past. We want our company to be mediocre moving forward. We don't want people who want to be exemplary. We want people who want to be average. Your boss is going to tell you to go fuck yourself. I'm going to go out there and find. He may say, okay, whatever, Mr. Beep. He'll keep you around till he finds someone else, and then he'll fucking fire your ass. That's what's going to happen. Morning, Joe. Heard a quote that made me think of you. That's what I love about capitalism. Prices go up, but my wages stay the same. Yeah, well, that's why I love being in a union, brother. I got a guaranteed 3% for the next 3 years. I've always been pro-union. Maybe I'm not supposed to say that here, but it is what it is. Thank you for the super chat, Sly. I appreciate that, brother. Yeah, that's why I've always been pro-union, man. I'm a big advocate in workers being able to negotiate and being able to have the say in a company. So that's what it is, guys, man. That's what it is. We're going to be called Canelo haters. We're going to have all these whataboutisms thrown in our face. But the reality of the situation is, this is the reality of the situation. And you have to understand this. If we apply this logic to everyone in the top 10 in super middleweight, and all these guys end up having to fight each other before they fight Canelo Alvarez, and we end up having a Super 6 tournament, similar to what Andre Ward had to do, right? Similar to what Andre Ward had to do. And when that Super 6 was going on, right? That Super 6 was going on, right? That Super 6 was going on, and everyone was saying, damn, man, this is going on. This is too long, man. It was like a fucking 3-year tournament, right? It's a 3-year tournament. And Lucien Butte wasn't in that tournament, and he wasn't able to fight any of those guys. And then after the tournament, he ends up fighting Kyle Froch, and then he gets knocked out. So while all these other guys are fighting top competition, sharpening their steel, Lucien Butte is getting the scraps, and what ended up happening to him? He fights one of the guys, the second place guy in that tournament, Kyle Froch, and gets destroyed, gets knocked out. So that's the thing. If this is the logic you guys want to apply, then keep in mind, if there's going to be a Super 6 with all these other guys at super middleweight, then you're not going to see Canelo fight a top guy for the next 3 years. And if you're happy with that, if your goal or your expectation is just to have your favorite fighter not lose another fight, then that's fine. If you don't want to see him in there with David Benavidez, you don't want to see him in there with other guys, right? Then that's fine. So my argument is, if he doesn't fight David Benavidez, then who do you want him to fight? Does anyone really want to see him fight a Bivol rematch? Does anyone think he could beat Bivol? And what if Ramirez beats Bivol? I mean, there was a reason why he said, I don't want to fight Mexican fighters. He brought that up again. He mentioned that again when he was asked about Zurdo. So if Zurdo wins, right, he's implied, I'm not saying he's outright said it, but he's implied that he would rather not fight him because he's Mexican. Okay, that's your right. That's fine. But people are going to ask, well, why would you want to fight Bivol and you don't want to fight Zurdo? Because Zurdo is a bigger guy. I think he hits harder than Bivol. Whether you think Bivol's going to beat Zurdo or not, whether you think Bivol would beat Beterbiev or not, if Canelo were to fight Zurdo and he were to fight Beterbiev, I think he would lose more decisively against those guys than he would against Bivol. I think he would get hurt. He has a chance of getting hurt. Those fights, there's two ways of losing, right? You could lose like Canelo lost to Bivol. He wasn't really significantly hurt in the fight. He was just out-finessed. He was out-finessed and outclassed. Or you could be in a tough fight with a guy like Bivol, with a guy like Beterbiev or a guy like Ramirez, and you could be in a tough, gritty, hard, physical fight, right, where you could actually get hurt and damaged, right? So what would you rather do? Would you rather be out finessed for 12 rounds, or would you rather be in a 12-round war, or would you rather be in a position where there's a possibility you can get knocked out, right? I could see Zurdo knocking out Alvarez. I could see Beterbiev definitely knocking out Alvarez. Would anyone pick Bivol? If Bivol fought Alvarez again, I think it would be another uneventful 12-round decision. So ask yourself this: if you're a fighter, would you rather be if you had to lose, would you rather be out finessed, or would you rather be beat up? Because he could potentially get beat up against Zurdo. He could potentially get beat up against Beterbiev. So it's a different circumstance, right? It's a different set of circumstances. So that's the thing, right? That's the thing. Would you rather be out finessed or would you rather be beat up? That's the question. Okay, the King. Thank you again, Bang. He said the King's Floyd Roy did what they want. The King's Floyd Roy did it. Why should Canelo change it? He doesn't have to change it. He doesn't have to change it. No one has to change anything. No one has to do anything. Once again, this is what people don't understand in this world. Anybody can do anything they want. They can say anything they want. They can do anything they want. But there will be repercussions and consequences to what they do. And the repercussions and consequences are they will be called out on it. They will be criticized for it. And if you notice, every time Canelo is asked about fighting the next guy, the next big name, he gets mad. And he looks at it as disrespect. And that's the wrong way to go about it. No one is saying your resume is, well, some people are, but the majority of people acknowledge that you have a great resume. You've done great things in the sport, that you are arguably one of the best fighters of your generation. No one's saying that. But because we want you to continue to be great, because we continue to ask you to prove it over and over again, because that's what great people do. Imagine if Michael Jordan said, I already won 5 championships. Why do I got to win the 6th? No. Every time Michael Jordan went out there, he challenged himself. If Michael Jordan could win 1,000 fucking championships, he would go out there and try to win 1,000 world championships. He never said, well, I already won 5. Why the fuck do you want me to win 6? It's actually when people constantly ask for Canelo to do great things, that's a compliment. When people put higher standards on Canelo, it's actually a compliment. It's not a criticism. It's a compliment, right? It's like when you have a coach and he's going at you harder than he's going at everyone else. And then you turn around and say, "Coach, why are you going at me harder than everyone else?" It's because I expect more of you because you're better than these other kids. You have more talent and ability than these other kids. So of course I'm going to go at you harder. Of course I'm going to expect more out of you because you are better than these other guys in terms of skill and ability. Your potential is higher than theirs. So by me or anyone else continuing to expect and ask Canelo to be great, why is that a bad thing? Why is that hate? That's not what it is. That's not what it is. Well, what about Benavidez? What about Charlo? What about Andre? What have they? Well, again, no one ever said Charlo was the best fighter in the world. No one ever said David Benavidez was the best fighter in the world. No one ever said Charlo was the best fighter of his era. Right? No one ever put Jamal Charlo on a pound for pound list. No one ever put David Benavidez on a pound for pound list. No one ever said these guys were the top guy in the sport. No one's ever said any of these things. So no one's ever classified these guys and put these guys on such a level that they've put Canelo Alvarez. So once again, the expectations are going to be different and higher for Canelo Alvarez. Why should we lower the bar for someone who's considered the best and compare him to people who are not considered the best? Just because people want him to fight Charlo because they want him to fight Benavidez, right? What's wrong with that? He doesn't have to do anything. He could fight whoever he wants and still make millions of dollars. But fans can still criticize. Fans can still have their preference on who they want him to fight. And because they have a preference on who they want him to fight, he really shouldn't get angry about that. He really shouldn't get angry about that. Bang Mateo says, this reminds us all to salute Manny Pacquiao, the GOAT. Okay, you can say that. It's a good argument. Now, I put a poll in the chat. 83% of the people would pick David Benavidez to beat John Ryder. In my opinion, John Ryder is going to be likely the next opponent. So you guys already kind of indicated to me and suggested to me that you believe David Benavidez is significantly better than John Ryder. So again, if he ends up fighting John Ryder instead of David Benavidez, which he probably will because, again, he's going to be locked into that DAZN deal. And John Ryder is going to be the next opponent. Mark my words. I said it before and I'll say it again. So you have to ask yourself, does John Ryder have a better resume than David Benavidez in his last 6 fights? Right? That's what you have to ask yourself. And in a perfect world, yes, all these guys should have fought each other. No argument here. No argument here. Is Canelo Alvarez's resume better than everyone in the top 10? 100% yes. Right? But it's supposed to be better. You know why? Because Canelo Alvarez is up here. These other guys are here. So he's supposed to have a better resume than these guys, or he would not be considered or never have been considered the best fighter pound for pound in the world. Right? Dimitri Bivol beat Canelo Alvarez, and Canelo Alvarez is still higher on the pound for pound list than Dimitri Bivol. Right? So even in losing, right? Even in losing, the standards are still higher for Canelo Alvarez than they are for Dimitri Bivol. He's number 5 on the pound for pound list, and Dimitri Bivol is number 7. And Dimitri Bivol beat Canelo Alvarez. And I understand, whatever. Again, I'm not a pound for pound guy. I can't make logic of this. the argument's going to be he's won more titles, he's got a better resume than Bivol, he's done more. I understand all that. That's great. But just keep in mind, Dimitri Bivol lost to Canelo Alvarez, and Canelo Alvarez is still considered a better fighter than him, which is why I don't like pound for pound. It just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense to me. Floyd Mayweather beats Manny Pacquiao, but Manny Pacquiao is the fighter of the decade. All right, whatever. I can't make sense of it. Maybe you guys can. Again, I understand that the criteria is different for each person, whatever. That's why I can never be a pound for pound guy. I don't do pound for pound lists. I just don't do it. Right? I just don't do it. You have someone like Devin Haney, who's listed as the best lightweight in the world by the ring, but then they have Vasyl Lomachenko on the pound for pound list. If you're not even the best fighter in your division, how can you be the best? So once again, once you get put on this list, then they're telling this list is pretty much telling the public, right? It's pretty much telling the public that you are on another level than everyone else. You're close to elite status. So you're asking people to have the same criteria and expectations for someone who's elite, right? The same standards and expectations that, to someone who's elite, and you're asking them to have the same standards for the elite person than they have for the person who's just good. So of course the standards and expectations are going to be different. Of course they're going to be different, right? So you can't be mad about that. No one can be mad about that. BoxRec still has Alvarez number 1 pound for pound. They got Bivol number 2, right? So people are still saying, even after he lost Canelo Alvarez, there are still people out there that are saying he's still the best fighter in the world. So if you're the best fighter in the world, right? Think about it. You're the best fighter in the world, then of course the expectations are going to be higher for you. So you can't compare the expectations of Canelo to the expectations of David Benavidez, Jermell Charlo, fucking Andre. Now you can say, well, why don't those guys do this? Why don't those guys do that? And I agree with you. They should be doing all those things you're asking them to do. I'm not giving them a pass. But because they're not doing what you're asking them to do, right? For whatever reason, right? Because of that, they don't have the status. So they don't have the status as Canelo Alvarez. Those guys will never be on a pound for pound list, right? They'll never make the money Canelo makes, right? So at the end of the day, those guys are not being rewarded for what they're doing. You can argue that they are, but they're not making the money Canelo's making. They don't have the status Canelo has, right? And until they do those things that you're asking them to do, they won't ever get there. Hopefully, and eventually they probably will fight each other. But it's taking a long time for whatever reason. And I'm not happy about it. I'm not saying you should be happy about it. I'm not saying you shouldn't ask those guys to fight each other. But keep in mind, if you're going to continue to use that logic for all of those guys, Demetrius Andrade fought nobody, right? David Benavidez fought nobody, right? John Ryder, decent, but in the last 6 really hasn't fought anybody. So if you use that same logic in the top 10 right now, because no one's if you look at everyone in the top 10 at super middleweight, and you look at their last 6, no one has lit the world on fire, right? So if you're going to use that same logic for David Benavidez, then you're going to have to use it for the rest of the top 10. And if you do that, and you're asking these guys, and I apologize for sounding redundant because I've repeated myself time and time again, and I'm doing this because I'm sure people are coming in late. So if all these guys do have to fight each other, because they all have pretty thin resumes in their last 6, right? I mean, we can go back in 10 years or whatever, but let's look at their last 6. That's the most relevant. That's what most people do. They look at the last 6. Last 6 is generally the last 3 years, right? That's what's most relevant. If we look at the top 10s, all last 6, no one's done anything stellar, stand out. No one's done anything stellar, stand out. So once again, if you're asking all these guys to fight each other and they got to do a Super Six, then again, he's not going to have anybody to fight. So when John Ryder gets announced as the next opponent, ask that same question of John Ryder that you're asking of David Benavidez. What has he done in his last 6 fights? He lost to Caleb Smith, split decision, and he beat a past his prime, faded Danny Jacobs by split decision. Is that more impressive than what David Benavidez did? That's what you have to ask yourself. In my opinion, John Ryder's last 6 is very similar and comparable to David Benavidez. If you want to say it's slightly better, because obviously he fought Caleb Smith, who was the best super middleweight in the world at that time, you can argue that. You can argue that. That's fine. But he's still in the record books lost to that guy. He lost to that guy. Right? He still lost to that guy. And you could argue that he lost to Danny Jacobs. Most people, 90% of the people had him losing that fight. So when Canelo Alvarez fights John Ryder next in a stadium in the UK, which I believe is very highly likely to happen, in my opinion, when that happens, right? I'm curious to see if you guys are going to say, what has John Ryder done lately to deserve this shot? Because if David Benavidez doesn't deserve this shot, based off of the criteria, right? Based off of the criteria that Canelo Alvarez has laid out there, and the rest of the Canelo Alvarez fans has laid out there, then why does John Ryder get the shot? Why does John Ryder get the shot? Well, Beeb, if they did it in the UK, then with John Ryder, it would be a much bigger event than if Canelo Alvarez fought David Benavidez in Las Vegas, California, or Arizona. You can make that argument. I may disagree with it, or I may agree with it. You can make that argument. But imagine putting Canelo Alvarez and David Benavidez in Vegas, right? Got a Mexican versus a Mexican, right? Rivalry. Promote that thing, right? Could put it on pay-per-view here in the United States, right? We saw what Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant did 800,000 pay-per-view buys. And then we saw what Canelo Alvarez and Dimitri Bivol did, like around 500,000 buys on DAZN, 550, whatever. Now, is Caleb Plant bigger than Dimitri Bivol? Probably, yeah. But is he really that much more popular than Dimitri Bivol? Slightly. But once again, if you would have put David Benavidez, Canelo Alvarez on Fox pay-per-view in the United States, you would have thrown that fight in Vegas right now. If you throw that fight in Vegas, my opinion, it would generate more revenue than a Canelo Alvarez versus John Ryder fight in the UK. Because once again, fights in the UK, right? Fights in the UK against John Ryder. Not a lot of people in the United States know who John Ryder is. You really couldn't put that fight on pay-per-view here on DAZN. Like DAZN would give that fight to us for free, right? And in the UK, would probably do decent numbers. UK, and once again, you sell out a stadium in the UK, the gate's going to be significantly less because the ticket prices are like 5 times less than they are if you would have put them in a casino in Vegas, right? So you would probably sell out a stadium, 70,000, 80,000 people, but once again, the live gate would be less, and the pay-per-views, even though you sell more pay-per-views in the UK, because the pay-per-views are so much cheaper in the UK, right? Because they're so much cheaper in the UK, that fight, in my opinion, wouldn't generate as much revenue as a David Benavidez Canelo Alvarez fight in the United States. I don't think it would. Because of how much more expensive the ticket prices are here, and because of how much more expensive the pay-per-view prices are over here. Because you couldn't put Canelo Alvarez, John Ryder on pay-per-view in the United States. So in my opinion, I'm being honest, right? Now this Gennady Golovkin Canelo Alvarez fight, it's a home run. It's a home run. I mean, that fight, monetarily, it was the biggest fight for Canelo Alvarez. I don't think there's any other fight out there that would be better for Canelo Alvarez right now than Gennady Golovkin. I concede that point. That was a smart business move. There's no question about that. But now that that fight's out of the way, moving forward, the next biggest fight monetarily in terms of revenue and significance, in my opinion, is David Benavidez. I don't think there's any other fight out there where Canelo Alvarez can make more money than David Benavidez, in my opinion. You can argue it. You can argue it. Shout out to the coach. I appreciate you. He says, salute to my brother Habib. Hit the like button, fam. I appreciate that, brother. Always good to see you stopping by, man. I really love what you do on your channel. I watch you all the time. I think you do great work. And make sure you subscribe to Coach Malachi over at New Media Today, USA Boxing. Love this guy's content. He's a great content creator here on YouTube. Shout out to him. Got to give him credit, brother. He says, you're right, Beeb. You have to hold everyone to the same criteria. I appreciate you acknowledging that. Team Batman Boston said Beebs is a legend. Thank you guys for all of the kind words in the chat. I appreciate that. It's good to be acknowledged. Thank you so much. Shout out to Coach. Shout out to everybody. Appreciate that all. Why couldn't they put Canelo versus Ryder in the States? They most certainly could, and they may very well do that. But I would think that would be a UK stadium fight. They've always said that they wanted to bring Canelo to the UK and fight in a stadium. What better fight to do that with than do that against than John Ryder, and do that with is John Ryder, in my opinion. But you can agree to disagree on that or even argue that. All right. I respect Canelo grind. Shit, you got me all fucked up. Nah, again, here's the thing, brother. We're not taking anything away from Canelo Alvarez. All I'm saying is this. When you are considered the greatest fighter in the world, when you're among the top 5 best fighters in the world, then obviously the expectations are going to be higher for you than everyone beneath you. And because we mention that and say that, we're not hating. We're actually giving you a compliment because you're on such a high level. We're telling you the expectations are higher for you than everyone else because you're better than everyone else, or at least said to be better than everyone else. Philly, what's up, brother? How you been, man? What are your thoughts on this whole conversation? Why does Canelo Alvarez get triggered every time David Benavidez's name gets mentioned?
Because people want to see the fight, and it's long overdue. Even though I think this is the easiest fight is David Benavidez, I think he easily beats Benavidez, but people still want to see the fight because a lot of people claim that he's the boogeyman, but he's not the boogeyman of this division. I don't think he is, but people are just anxious to see the fight to see how it turns out. And I understand that because he's a young, hungry fighter and everything. He's been champion twice in this division, but maybe it's long overdue. Maybe we have to see this fight just to everybody see, hey, I fought the guy. I beat the guy. What else is there for me to do? What else do you want from me? But tell you the truth, I thought the fight yesterday, I thought it sucked. I did not like the fight whatsoever. I thought the fight was terrible. I thought Canelo dominated Triple G, as I knew he would do, because this Triple G was not the same since the second Canelo fight. He has not been. He's been very inactive.
Uh-oh. Gotta put him back on it. All right, he dropped. So we'll take him out. If you want to come back in, Philly, you can definitely. All right. Are you back, brother?
Yeah. So, I think he hasn't been the same since the second Canelo fight. Like, he clearly lost the Dovchenko fight, in my opinion. He didn't really, he fought a guy that had no power in the fight after that he easily went through. Verota, he had problems with him in the first 4 rounds. If Verota didn't have stamina issues, I thought Verota probably could have put it off. But Now, this is a Triple G that became old, that became really gun shy into the later rounds. But even if he did, even in the later rounds, he still didn't really do much. I only gave him 2 rounds in this fight. And I said last night, if anybody gave Triple G more than 3 rounds, you clearly shouldn't be watching boxing and you clearly don't know nothing. Because this dude did not win more than 3 rounds.
What rounds did you give? What rounds did you give? Triple G? I'm just curious if you don't mind me asking. If you don't have it ready, that's fine. You don't have to.
I only gave him the 9th and the 10th.
Oh, so you only gave him 2 rounds?
Yeah, I only gave him 2 rounds, 9th and 10th.
See, it's funny because some people gave him 9 and 11, and some people gave him 9 and 10. I gave him 9, 10, and 11. And I'm going to be honest with you, and you can agree to disagree if you want. That's fine. Do you think it was possible to give Triple G the first round or no?
No, I don't see how you can give him the first round.
I could see him winning the first round, but that's just me. I could see, at best, 8-4. I scored it 9-3. I gave Triple G 9, 10, and 11, right? You could argue that Golovkin won round 10. Excuse me, round. You could argue that Canelo won round 10. I should say, excuse me. You can argue that. But I could see possibly 8-4. I have a real hard time seeing 7-5. That's a bit of a stretch. I think the general consensus out there, if you were to poll everyone, most people had it 117 and 111. There were some people that had it 118 and 110. Russ Amber, great cut man, great assistant in the corner for a lot of great fighters. He replied to my tweet, and he said that he had it 118 and 110. So a few people had it 118 and 110. Yeah, it could have been a multitude of scorecards. I could see anything from 118 and 110 to 116 and 112, but 115 and 113. And this is a subjective sport. The scorecards can be all over the place. I get that. Sulan, what's up, brother? What you got?
Hey, how you doing?
What's up, brother?
So this fight here, that's an opponent, the IBO champion, man. He could go like the IBO champion in England, and that's like a tune-up fight for him, and he gets the IBO belt, and people get to see him, the exposure. Then that's a build-up. That's a build-up for the fight with Ryder. I think the is that if they don't make more revenue, then he could bring Ryder to the United States. He's ranked. Ryder's ranked. I mean, United States. First fight, Lemon Richards. Test the waters out, plus get the IBO belt, and then bring it here to the United States, and see if Ryder creates enough revenue, if the fight creates enough revenue in England, and if not, bring Ryder to Las Vegas. That's all. It's easy, man. He made $46 million for this fight.
So let me ask you this. So would you rather see a Ryder fight or a fight with the IBO champion more so than a David Benavidez fight? Or in your opinion, would you like to see that David Benavidez fight marinate a little bit? What is your opinion on that whole thing? You're on mute, brother. I can't really hear you. See if you can fix your mic up. I know you guys are like kind of out and about. You're out doing things. It's hard.
Okay,
go ahead, brother.
Okay, what I'm saying is, Benavidez, he messed up. Okay, so Benavidez gotta make himself credible. If he wants to be so credible, why you don't fight Andrade? Push for a fight with Andrade. Push for a fight with Carlos Gongora. Push for a fight with Devil Morel. He gotta do something that makes him more credible, more legitimate at this time to make that fight. That fight's not gonna happen. And plus, they gotta want to fight him. At the end of the day, the guy don't want to fight him, man. He don't want to fight him. He don't want to fight him. So let Canelo fight who he wants to fight. The guy, he got an interim belt, right? Defend that belt, make yourself more credible, make yourself more likable. You know what I'm saying? Pursue him in a professional manner and continue to move on. They gotta want to fight him, man. He's like when Keith Thurman was a WBA regular champion at 147. Floyd didn't want to fight him. What did Keith do? He continued to fight the best opponents. So when Floyd retired, he moved on to bigger and better things and became the top marquee. Even now, Keith Thurman is a marquee fighter at 147. So that's what Benavidez got to do. He got to do the Keith Thurman platform at 168. Continue to fight opponents. Start crying. Trying to attain belts that are available. Devil Moreau's belts available. The IPO belts available, and make things happen, man. These guys, it's true what Mike Tyson said. These guys are crybabies. They want to make things happen. Everybody's blaming the guy that made 46 million, which I think he's not doing nothing wrong. He made 46 million fighting Triple G. Okay, Triple G made 20 million. Triple G tried to fight. He saw he couldn't handle the power, so he just boxed. He boxed. He knows he still got 3 belts out of 160. So that's what these guys got to do. They got to continue to move on and advance and acclimate to the boxing environment, which Canelo Alvarez has today. He fought an excellent fight yesterday. He didn't take no risks, didn't get no injuries. You know what I'm saying? He's fighting a guy with a granite chin. And now he's looking at what's going on at 175. He's going to be looking at what's going on with the other opponents at 168. But I think what's going to happen, Benavidez is going to probably retire soon. There's going to be more belts at 175. I don't think Benavidez is going to fight anymore, guys. He's too injury prone right now this time. I think he's going to go out in the limelight. He's going to go out while he's on top and retire. So there's going to be more belts at 168. And Bush's going to probably get the ring title because he's going to be the top tier fighter. And there's going to be a rematch for that fight. But at the meantime, Benavidez, he got to make himself more marketable, man. Everybody want to put Benavidez in there in the same caliber as a Canelo. He's not. He got stripped 2 times. He got an interim belt. He got to become more credible, man. What do you think about what I'm saying right now, Habib?
So, in your opinion, you don't really care who Canelo fights next. It just you're in the opinion that he could fight whoever he wants because of his status. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, right now, marketable wise, right?
Can't hear you right now. You went mute. Yeah. It seems like that there are some people that believe that they don't really care who Canelo fights. That he can pick and choose who he wants to fight. That's fine. Go ahead, Suleiman. Respond.
Okay, what I'm saying is that right now, right, Canelo's hot. He could pick and choose who he wants. He's a top dog. He probably have no mandatory right now. That guy could wait on the mandatory. He could ask that.
All right, you're having some issues with your mic. What I'm going to do, Suleiman, I'm going to kick you out of the studio, and you can come back in because it seems like you're having an issue here with your connection. Sorry about that. You can try to jump back in. Maybe it's it's connection, whatever. I apologize. Yeah, so it seems like Canelo has an injury. They're saying that he's saying that he had a hand injury. So we don't really know what's going to happen moving forward. How long he's going to be out. But we still have to take a look at this Dimitri Bivol Azura Ramirez fight, and that's going to have a huge impact on who Canelo Alvarez fights next. He's got 1 fight left on this DAZN contract, and we don't know how this is going to play out. It's going to be interesting to see, how this whole thing plays out moving forward. But I think I pretty much did cover everything here. I'm interested to see your guys' opinions in the chat. He's back. Let me see if he's back. All right, how's the sound? How's the sound now?
It sounds good. Hey, Habib, listen, I'm about to finish with because I don't want to get messed up. But what I'm saying is that these guys right there, they like a better beef. But what's his name? Benavidez. He got to fight. Look, there's opponents there, man. He got to stop crying. He got to make himself more available for Canelo. Canelo either vacate or leave. He already got a piece of the WBC, right? Go look in there at 160. Take over available belts. He got to take the IBO. He got to get the WBA regular if they let him, because somebody was saying, the boxing boys, that you can't do that. That you won't be able to get the regular belt. But if can he get the regular belt and unify with the other belts, the other interim belt?
Yeah, possibly. Not sure. Not sure. I've seen fighters have the regular belt before and have another. I've seen them do that before. Canelo. I mean, I'm not Canelo.
I know they did it with the IBO.
Golovkin has the IB.
He did it with IBO, right?
No, Canelo. Excuse me. Golovkin has the IBF and he has the regular WBA, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Let me take a look at what. Let me take a look at. Let me see. Golovkin at middleweight, what he has. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, he has. Golovkin has the full at WBA, and Iverslandi Lara has the regular. So the Boxing Voice may be right with that. I think they're right with that. That if you have a major title, I'm not sure. I think you can or you can't. I'm not 100% sure on that. It's something I'd have to research, if I'm being honest. All right, Suleiman, you seem to be having some audio issues. I'm gonna let you go here. No disrespect, but I'm gonna let you go here because you keep going in and out. So we'll talk later. We'll talk later, brother. All right. Like I said, guys, pretty much said it all. Not much more to talk about here on this topic. Like I said, I'm curious to see what you guys say in the chat. Love to hear your opinion. But until next time, Beaver's out. Make sure you check us out tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Ringside Reporter Podcast. We're going to have a great show, which is obviously going to recap this fight and talk more about Canelo Alvarez, Gennady Golovkin's future. So make sure you join us tonight, and I will talk to you all soon. Have a great day. Peace out, everyone. Take care.